The sun hung heavy over Gila Bend, a sleepy dust-bitten town that woke early that July morning with a taste for spectacle. It was Hanjin Day, and the folks had come from all corners, some riding horses, others in rickety wagons, kids perched up high like barn owls, just to get a glimpse of justice being served. A rough wooden scaffold stood at the far end of town, right near where the livery barn met the churchyard, its fresh timber a rude contrast to the weathered buildings around it. It had been thrown up just yesterday, real quick-like, though folks said it had been a long time coming. At the center of it all stood Mercy Delaney. Her name had been whispered in saloons and spat out over poker tables for weeks. She weren't no outlaw by trade, least not by the common reckoning. But the mayor was dead, his brandy bottle laced with belladonna, and Mercy'd been the only soul in that house when his cold hand dropped the glass. They said she didn't cry when they came for her. Said she didn't beg when they put her in chains. Said she just looked at Em with those calm gray eyes, like she already knew her fate and made peace with it. Sheriff Amos Callahan stood stiff at the base of the scaffold, thumb hooked over his belt, sweat slicking down his neck beneath that big OL star he wore. He'd never been one for women on the gallows, but the judge had ruled swift, and the town wanted a neck to hang their anger on. "Y'all quiet down," he barked as the noose was checked by Deputy Reddick, a young fella with nerves that rattled like a canteen full of dry beans. "We're here to carry out the law, not gawk like buzzards." Mercy walked up the steps without tremble or word, her pale dress smudged with jailhouse dirt, her hands bound in front. She didn't look at the crowd, didn't look at the preacher, just stared straight ahead as the sun blazed down like judgment itself. Then a horse's cry split the still air. It wasn't a loud noise, not really, but it hit like thunder. From the east end of town came a rider. Dust rose in his wake, and the way he sat that saddle, lean and tall, made folks squint through the glare. He weren't riding fast, but he rode with purpose, straight down Main Street, right toward the gallows, like he didn't care one whit what law or rope waited at the end of it. Folks began murmuring. Sheriff Callahan's jaw clenched as he squinted through the sun. The rider pulled up at the foot of the scaffold, his horse lathered and breathing hard. He was dressed in trail-worn denim and a long tan duster. A wide hat shadowed his face, but when he looked up, the whole crowd seemed to hush at once. "Might want to hold that rope a minute," he said, voice low but firm as a thundercloud. Callahan's hand drifted to his holster. "This is official business. Best you move along, mister." The man didn't blink. "Name's Calder. Some of y'all might remember me. And Lord help the town of Gila Bend. Remember him they did. Years back, Calder had been the fastest draw west of the Pecos, a bounty man, lawless to some, legend to others. Some said he once shot a man through the eye without even looking. Others claimed he'd turned down a U.S. Marshal badge just 'cause he didn't like the way it felt on his coat. But that day, what folks remembered most was how Mercy Delaney's face changed. Her lips parted, just a crack. Her eyes flickered. Not fear, not hope, recognition. "Don't do this, Calder," Callahan warned, voice rough. "She's been tried. The jury found her guilty." Calder dismounted, slow and deliberate. "A jury of ranchers and storekeeps who owed Mayor Thatcher favors. A trial where the defense lawyer didn't ask a single question." "You ain't the law," Reddick stammered, but his voice held no weight now. Calder looked up at Mercy. "Tell him, darling. Tell him what really happened." Mercy's voice was soft but clear, like a breeze cutting through a canyon. They wouldn't listen then. Why would they now? He stepped closer, voice low. "Because now I'm here. And I'm your husband." The crowd gasped like a thunderclap had struck the scaffold itself. Even Callahan stumbled back a step. "What in the devil? You're her what?" Calder's hand rested light on the butt of his revolver. "Married her 6 years ago down in Mesilla under a preacher named Hicks. Didn't use her real name back then. She was running from something. Something like this." Mercy was staring at him now, something in her eyes the win. "You should be come." "Too late," he said, eyes locked on hers. "You're mine, Mercy Delaney, and no town's handing my wife." Sheriff Callahan's hand hovered near his Colt, sweat beading at his temple. If this is some stunt to delay the sentence, you're going to regret it, Calder. Not a stunt, Calder replied, stepping up to the base of the scaffold. It's a fact. Got the paper to prove it, signed and stamped. Got it in my saddlebag, unless one of y'all's afraid to fetch it. Reddick hesitated, glancing to Callahan. The sheriff gave a tight nod, and the deputy jogged to the horse, rummaged through the worn leather bags, and pulled out a folded document sealed in wax. He handed it up to the judge, who squinted through cracked spectacles. Marriage certificate, he muttered, half-shocked. Dated August 13th, 1883, Mesilla, New Mexico Territory. Wasn't my name then, Mercy said softly, her voice drifting down like ash on still air. Went by Lily Kerrigan. Calder turned toward the crowd. This woman, my wife, ain't no poisoner. She ran because the mayor made her life a hell no soul should have to live through. I was coming for her, but I was late. By then, she'd changed her name again, hid in plain sight in that vulture's house. Callahan spit into the dirt. You expect us to believe that? That you just happened to come strolling in the same day she's set to hang? Didn't come to stop the hanging, Calder said, voice slow as molasses. Came to bury her proper. Thought she was already gone. Then I heard they were stringing up a woman with gray eyes and a silent tongue. Only one woman I ever knew who could quiet a room just by standing in it. Mercy closed her eyes. It was true. They'd met in the border town of Mesilla, back when she was working under a false name, hiding from the ghosts of a cruel employer and a bloodied past. Calder'd been leaner then, with more whiskey in his step and less steel in his gaze. But the fire between them had been quick and clean. They'd married with a paper ring and promises made over a borrowed Bible. 2 weeks later, she vanished, not with spite but survival. Calder had searched every territory west of the Mississippi, and now he stood before her with the noose creaking above her head. The judge cleared his throat. Married or not, this don't change the verdict. She was found at the scene. The mayor's drink was poisoned, and she was the only one present. Then explain this, Calder said, and drew a small velvet pouch from his coat. Found this in Thatcher's old barn on the edge of his land, hidden beneath the loose floorboard in the feed room. He opened it and poured out a handful of dried, crumbled leaves. Belladonna, he said. Same stuff used in the killing, except this wasn't stored careful-like. This was stashed in a hurry, and Mercy never went near that barn. She told me so herself, years back. She's terrified of horses. A few gasps rippled through the crowd. A few murmurs. Doubt was a slow seed, but it had been planted. Callahan looked toward the judge, who was shifting nervously in his seat. We should take a recess, the judge muttered. Re-examine evidence. No, Mercy said suddenly, her voice sharp enough to split wood. No recess. No delay. If you're going to hang me now. But don't pretend this was ever about justice. The crowd stilled again. Mercy turned toward Calder. Why'd you come? He looked up at her, his eyes burning with 1,000 untold miles. Because I never stopped looking. Because you're still my wife. Because love don't end just 'cause time passed or mistakes were made. She blinked once. You're a fool. He smiled, weary and wide. That's the second thing you ever said to me. First was, don't touch the stew, it's poison. She almost smiled. Almost. The judge cleared his throat. I'm calling for an official delay. This new evidence needs review. The rope was pulled back. Mercy's wrists were unbound. Sheriff Callahan looked like a man who'd swallowed gunpowder. As Calder led Mercy down the scaffold steps, she leaned in and whispered, This don't mean I forgive you. I ain't a skin for that, he said. Just a skin for a chance to ride beside you again. And with the sun beaten down and the crowd dispersing in stunned silence, Mercy Delaney walked free, her steps slow, her eyes haunted, but her spine straight as ever. Gila Bend faded behind them like a fever dream, the gallows still standing in the rear view of memory. Calder rode easy, his horse moving slow beneath the summer blaze, while Mercy sat behind him, back straight as a fence post, hands resting light on his sides, but not like she used to. They didn't talk for the first hour. Dust rose behind them in lazy curls, and cicadas sang loud in the mesquite. The land stretched out wide and golden, so dry even the sagebrush looked thirsty. Mercy watched the horizon with the same look she gave him back in Mesilla, like it might vanish if she blinked too long. Calder finally broke the silence. "There's a place yonder, 'bout 2 ridges out. Old line shack I stayed in a while back. Still got a roof, last I checked." Mercy didn't answer, just looked ahead. "You hungry?" he asked. Her reply was flat. "I don't trust food I didn't make." Calder grunted. "Still ornery. Still reckless." She shot back. The air between them settled like coals, glowing but quiet. By mid-afternoon, they reached the shack. It sat half-hidden neath a dry oak, its boards warped and gray, roof patched with bits of old canvas and sheer stubbornness. Calder dismounted first, then offered his hand. She ignored it and swung down herself. Inside was one room, dusty but clean. A cast-iron stove, a cot, a bucket, and not much else. Calder pulled out a tin of beans and a hunk of jerky, set to making something halfway edible, while Mercy dusted off a crate to sit on. "You always travel like this?" she asked, nodding at the sparse supplies. "I travel light," he said. "Makes it easier to leave." That hung in the air a spell too long. Mercy folded her arms. "You think bringing up old times will fix what was broke?" Calder stirred the pot. "Nope." "Good," she said. "'Cause it won't." He dished out the beans, handed her a bowl. She took it, real careful like it might explode. But she ate. "Tell me what happened," he said after a while. "With Thatcher." Mercy set the bowl down. Her voice was quiet, but every word was a bullet. "He was cruel, but careful about it. Never left a mark that'd show. Never struck me where his guests might see. But every night, he made sure I remembered who owned me." Calder's jaw clenched. "I planned to leave again," she continued. "But then he started talking about marriage." Calder blinked. "To you?" She nodded. "Said it would clean my reputation. Said I owed him." A long silence followed. The only sound was the beans boiling down to mush. "I didn't poison him," she said. "But when he died, I didn't shed a tear either." Calder looked at her, slow and sure. "You never needed to. Man like that earned his fate." Mercy met his gaze. "You believe me?" "I always did," he said. "Even when I couldn't find you, I believed in you more than most things in this life." She didn't answer, but her eyes softened, just a flicker, like maybe a window had cracked open somewhere deep inside. That night, they didn't share the cot. Calder laid his bedroll near the door, his revolver within arm's reach. Mercy slept with her boots on, back to the wall, same as she had all her life. Come morning, she was the first to rise, already pulling coffee from the dregs of what he had. The air outside was cool, the kind of morning where the heat hadn't woke up yet, but you knew it was coming. "What's your plan?" she asked. "Keep you alive," Calder said simply. "Then maybe find who really killed Thatcher." She sipped her coffee. "And if I say I want to run instead, I'll ride beside you." Mercy studied him a long while. "You really are a fool." He tipped his hat. "I try." They rode west by way of the old cattle road that hadn't seen a proper herd in near a decade. The sun rose like fire on the flat edge of the earth, burning away the morning chill and laying bare every scar the land and its riders carried. Calder didn't press her with talk. Mercy didn't offer none either. But each mile wore down a sliver more of the silence between them. Midday found them watering their horses at a half-dead stream, its muddy trickle hiding under brambles. Mercy crouched near the bank, her reflection flickering like smoke on the water. Calder watched from the shade, leaning against a rock, hand on his hip like always. "Why'd you keep looking for me?" she finally asked, not looking up. He scratched his jaw. "'Cause you were the only thing I ever chased that felt worth catching." She gave a bitter chuckle. "You didn't catch me. I ran." "Still chased," he said. That quieted things again. But trouble don't wait for silence. They heard the riders long before they saw him. 5 men. Dust trails high. Riding hard and fast. Calder cursed low. "Get to the rocks," he barked, motioning toward a crop in nearby. They barely made it before the first shots rang out, sharp, cracking through the dry air like bones snapping. The bullets hit the dust, just shy of their horses. Calder yanked Mercy behind a boulder and drew his Colt with that same smooth calm he always carried. "They following you or me?" she hissed. "Don't matter now," he said, peeking over the rock. The riders weren't bandits, not by the look of them. They wore dusters without badges, but carried themselves like hired guns. One had a scarred cheek and a duster stitched in silver thread, a fancy touch Mercy recognized too well. "Thatcher's boys," she breathed. "He had cousins in Tombstone. Didn't like me much." Calder grinned grim. "Well, they like you even less now." The fight didn't last long, but it sure left a mark. Calder took 2 down with clean shots. Mercy surprised him, grabbing his second revolver and winging a third. Her hand shook after, but her aim had been true. The other 2 ran when the tide turned, leaving behind dust and hoofbeats and a lingering threat. When it was over, Calder sat back hard, breathing heavy. "You always shoot that good." She handed back the pistol. "Only when I mean it." They buried the dead beneath a mesquite tree. Quick work, not ceremonious. Calder tipped his hat. Mercy just stared at the mound of dirt, like it might move again. They rode on. By sunset, they'd made camp in the crook of a red rock canyon. Firelight danced in their eyes, flickering over sweat, dust, and days not yet spoken for. Mercy stared into the flames. "I ain't ready to forgive you." "I know, but I don't hate you either." He nodded. "Good," he said. "I can live in that middle ground a while." She looked over at him, her face soft with a fire's edge. "You gonna ask me to come back with you?" "No," he said. "You don't belong to me. Never did. I just want you to ride where you choose." For the first time since the gallows, she smiled. It weren't big, weren't even long, but it was real, and it was enough for now. By the time they reached Dead Elm, the moon was riding high, and the town slept uneasy under its glow. It wasn't much, a few buildings leaning on each other like drunks, a single lantern still burning in the window of the saloon, and silence that felt borrowed, like it didn't belong here. Calder pulled up outside a boarding house. "We'll stay the night," he said. "No one asks questions in Dead Elm, not unless they got a death wish." Mercy nodded, but her eyes were wary. "I remember this place," she said. "This is where Thatcher sent me once. To collect." "Collect what?" She looked away. "A debt from a widow who couldn't pay it." Inside, the boarding house was run by a wiry woman named Aggie, who smoked a pipe like it was part of her face and spoke in grunts. She took their coin without a word and gave M the upstairs room with 2 beds and 1 window that barely opened. Calder watched the street from that window well into the night, revolver close, boots off, but socks still on. Mercy sat on the edge of her bed, picking at a loose thread on her cuff. "You ever think we could have made it work?" she asked suddenly. He didn't turn from the window. "Back then." She nodded. He shrugged. "I think we was too young, too stubborn, too hurt." And now, he finally looked at her. Still hurt, maybe not too young. The silence that followed was thick as saddle leather and twice as worn. Next morning, they paid Aggie and walked to the edge of town. Calder said they were heading north, toward a man he knew in Copper Hollow who'd once worked Thatcher's books. "Name's Preacher Wills," Calder said. "A drunk who used to cook numbers like flapjacks. If someone paid for poison, he'd know." They rode long that day, the trail hard and the sun mean. But Copper Hollow was close. Mercy stayed quiet till near sundown, then said, "I want to know if Thatcher's death had a price." "It did," Calder said. "We just don't know who paid it." When they reached Copper Hollow, they found the church doors barred and Preacher Wills in a shed behind it, drunk as a coyote and talking to birds. Took an hour to sober him, with strong coffee and threats. "Yeah," he said, finally talking sense. "Someone paid for poison. $50 in silver. Had it delivered through the Chandler boy. Quiet transaction. No names." Calder leaned in. "But you kept a record." Wills grinned, toothless and mean. "I'm a man of faith. Of course I did." He pulled a ledger from under a broken pew. Inside, names scratched in faded ink. And there, on the fourth line, was one Mercy knew too well. Rhett Callahan, she whispered. Sheriff Amos Callahan's little brother. The deputy. The one with the nervous eyes and the twitchy hands. Calder stood, fury steady in his jaw. I'll be. He loved Thatcher. Wills muttered. Worshipped him. Probably thought Mercy was polluting the house, just by breathing. Mercy stood too, face cold as river stone. He framed me. Calder nodded. And tomorrow, we ride back to Gila Bend. The trail back to Gila Bend felt different. Not just cause they rode faster, or cause the air was thick with vengeance, but cause Mercy wasn't just following anymore. She was lead in beside Calder, chin high, eyes sharp. They made camp just outside town, tucked in behind a ridge where the mesquite grew tall enough to hide a man on horseback. Calder staked the horses, while Mercy stared down at the place. She almost died. Reckon they'll listen to proof this time? She asked. Calder shook his head. Don't matter if they do. I ain't here to ask permission. They waited for nightfall, then rode in quiet. Shadows draped over them like shawls. First stop was the courthouse. Locked tight, but Calder picked it easy with the skill of a man who'd seen too many cells from the inside. Inside, the ledger from Preacher Wills was placed on the judge's desk, right next to the glass vial Reddick had dropped years ago, the one he claimed Mercy never touched. Mercy left a note. Read this before the sun rises, or someone else will. Second stop was the sheriff's office. Callahan wasn't there, but Reddick was. He sat behind the desk, leaning back like he owned the stars. He barely had time to reach for his iron before Mercy was in the door, gun drawn, voice low and deadly. Stand up slow. Reddick froze, sweat bead in his brow. Calder stepped in behind her, his revolver already level. You're going to tell us who put you up to it? I didn't, he stammered. Mercy stepped closer. Don't lie. Not now. Not when I almost swung for your sins. Reddick swallowed hard. It was my brother, he blurted. Sheriff Callahan. He thought the mayor was going to change his will. Said you were going to take everything. Mercy's breath caught. He wanted to protect the town. Reddick continued, voice cracking. Said Thatcher's money kept this place alive. Said if you got it, everything would crumble. Calder's jaw tightened. So you planted the poison. Framed her. I didn't know it'd go this far, Reddick whispered. Mercy's voice was ice. You knew exactly how far. Just then, the door creaked. Sheriff Callahan stepped in, shotgun in hand. His eyes took in the scene, his brother pale and trembling, Mercy with a pistol, Calder steady as a cliff. Well, he said slowly, ain't this a reunion? Drop it, Calder said. Callahan smirked. You think I'm scared of you, Calder? You think a couple of drifters with a grudge can outlast the law? Mercy stepped forward. You ain't the law. Not anymore. Callahan's eyes flicked to the shotgun. This here says different. He raised it, but Calder was faster. The shot rang out loud and sharp. Callahan's gun flew from his hands, his shoulder torn by Calder's bullet. He hit the ground hard, groaning in pain. Reddick slumped, defeated. He was always the one people listened to. I just did what he said. Mercy stared down at the man who'd nearly killed her with silence and a lie. You're going to walk into town at first light, she said. You're going to tell Am what you did, what he did, and if you don't. Calder spoke now, voice cold. I'll finish what I started. 2 days passed since the truth came out. 2 days since Mercy Delaney walked free in the town that nearly hung her. Gila Bend moved cautious now, folks nodding to her in the street with downcast eyes, as if sorry could be said without speaking a word. Calder sat on the porch of the boarding house, boots up on the rail, Che Win on a sliver of sweetgrass. Mercy joined him with a tin cup of coffee, black and bitter, just how she liked it. Feels strange, she said, watching the townsfolk shuffle by. Freedom always does, Calder replied. She looked out at the gallows, still standing, like a ghost in the sun. They should tear it down. They will, he said, once they stop needing reminders. Mercy glanced at him sideways. You planning to stay? Calder shifted. Didn't figure I'd gotten that far yet. Well, she said, slow and thoughtful, I ain't planning to stick round. Not in a place where they'd killed me and gone home whistling. He nodded. Where to? Don't rightly know, she said, but I got a map in my head and boots on my feet. They sat in silence a while. Then Mercy stood. I'm leaving at first light. Calder stood too. Then I reckon I got till sunup to convince you not to ride alone. She smirked. Reckon you'd better get to work then. That night, the saloon buzzed soft. No loud talk, no rowdy cards. Just a slow hum of fiddle music, and folks drinking in peace. Calder bought Mercy a drink, rye whiskey, and a clink of respect. I ain't saying I deserve another chance, he said. I just want to be the kind of man that does. Mercy sipped her drink. You already are. Later, under the stars, they stood near the livery, where her borrowed horse was saddled and ready. I'll ride with you, Calder said. Mercy looked up at him, eyes softer now, but still storm-shadowed. And if I don't ask you to? I'll still ride, just far enough behind you not to get in the way. She smiled. Fool. He tipped his hat. Yours. When the morning sun kissed the horizon, two riders left Gila Bend behind. One carried the weight of survival, the other the hope of redemption. And together, they disappeared into the long heat of summer, where the wind carried stories and justice rode with a quiet hand. 3 towns gone, and 20 days later, Mercy and Calder rode into Dust Whistle, a squat patch of buildings nestled against sun-bleached cliffs, where the only shade came from the shadows folk kept to themselves. They weren't looking for trouble, but trouble sure found them. It started in the saloon, don't it always? A man with a gold-toothed grin and a scar that ran ear to chin sat at the end of the bar, nursing a bottle like it owed him blood. He looked at Mercy too long. Calder noticed. So did she. You know him? Calder asked, keeping his voice low. Mercy didn't answer right away. Then, quiet as dusk, she said, Used to ride with Thatcher's cousins. Called himself Boone. Boone stood, wiped his mouth with the back of his hand, and sauntered over. Well, I'll be, he drawled. If it ain't the ghost of Gila Bend. They said you danced at the end of a rope, girl. I guess they said wrong, she replied flat. He looked at Calder, eyes squinting against the lantern light. And you must be the man dumb enough to follow her out of hell. I reckon I am, Calder said, slow and easy. But I shoot straighter than I think. So choose your next words careful. Boone laughed, but it wasn't kind. I got a bounty says otherwise. 500 in silver. Says dead or alive. Don't matter much. You planning to collect? Calder asked. Boone stepped back, hand drifting toward his hip. I was. But he never drew. Calder moved like thunder, his gun barking once. Boone dropped where he stood, bottle shot Aaron beside him, blood blooming dark on the floorboards. The saloon emptied faster than a trough at a cattle drive. Calder holstered his iron and looked at Mercy. We should go. No, she said. We should finish. Boone had friends. 3 of 'em waiting outside by the livery, heard the shot, and came running. The shootout was fast, loud, and left the street littered with brass and boot prints. When it was done, Mercy stood over the last man, who tried to crawl away with a shattered leg. She looked him dead in the eye. Tell whoever sent Boone that Mercy Delaney ain't running. Not no more. He nodded, blood on his lip, fear in his eyes. And just like that, it was done. They rode out with the setting sun behind him. The road lit in orange fire, the wind blowing hot and hard from the east. What now? Calder asked. Mercy looked ahead, her face unreadable. Now we hunt who put that bounty out. They rode steady for 2 days, following whispers on the wind and leads as thin as a prairie dog's tail. Word was spreading quick about a woman with gray eyes and a dead man's bounty trailing behind her like a wagon with a busted wheel. In the town of Stonetree, they found what they were looking for, the name. A skinny banker named Pike, too nervous to lie and too greedy to die, spilled it after a few coins clinked in Calder's revolver gave him pause. Name's Elijah Thatcher. Pike muttered, fingers twitching. Mayor's nephew. Thought the inheritance was his, till your girl came around. Mercy crossed her arms. He put the bounty out. Pike nodded. Didn't want her dead, just disappeared. Guess Boone didn't know the difference. They left him sweating behind his ledger. Elijah Thatcher. Not an outlaw. Not a gunslinger. Just a man with too much money and not enough soul. Mercy stared into the distance as they rode out. He was at the funeral, she said. Shook my hand. Said he was sorry. Calder's jaw tightened. That's the kind that cuts deepest. Smiling while they sharpened the knife. They camped that night under a ridge where the rocks caught the last red light of the sun. Mercy didn't eat. Just sat quiet watching the fire. I keep thinking, she said, voice low, about the gallows, about what it felt like. Calder didn't interrupt. I wasn't scared of dying, she continued. I was scared no one would ever know I didn't deserve it. Calder reached across the fire, laid his hand on hers. They know now. She looked up, her eyes hard. Not enough. The next day, they rode straight toward Flat Ridge, where Elijah Thatcher kept a summer home, fat with guards and greed. No sneaking. No backdoor talking. Mercy walked up the main path, like she owned the ground it was built on. Calder stood beside her. Elijah came out on the porch with a glass of brandy and a pistol at his side. Well, he said, I was wondering when Wild'd come. Mercy's voice was like dry paper. Bounty's dead. You're next if you don't drop it. He sipped his drink, calm as a preacher. You won't shoot me. You kill me. And folks'll say the rope should have held. Calder stepped forward. Then maybe I shoot you. And folks'll say justice finally found its boots. Elijah's smile faltered. Mercy pulled a paper from her coat. A copy of the ledger, Preacher Wills's note, Callahan's confession, all tied with string and fury. Town council's getting this tomorrow, she said. You'll be stripped of every acre you bought with blood and bribes. He paled. You got till dawn to ride out and never come back, she added. After that, well, I ain't the only ghost in these parts anymore. They left him there, the wind picking up, smelling like storm and regret. The sun was just rising when Mercy and Calder rode out of Flat Ridge, the dust of Elijah Thatcher's legacy still settling behind him. He didn't follow. He didn't send no more riders. Maybe he'd finally realized what happens when you try and hang the wrong soul. They didn't speak much that day. Just rode side by side, their horses moving easy over packed dirt, hooves beating a rhythm older than time. The summer heat swelled in waves, but neither of them felt it, not really. They were carrying other kinds of weight. By sundown, they stopped near a bluff overlooking the low valley, where the river curled like a lazy rattler. Mercy dismounted first, stood at the edge, hands on her hips. I think I'm done running, she said. Calder joined her. You ain't gotta run no more. She glanced at him. Maybe not, but I'm still leaving. He nodded, not surprised. Where to? She smiled faint. Don't know yet. Maybe a place where nobody's heard my name, where I can plant something in the ground and watch it grow instead of burying the past in it. He pulled off his hat, held it in his hands like it was something sacred. I could ride with you. I know, she said. The silence was long. Finally, she looked at him, her eyes clear as a summer creek. You followed me through hell, Calder. You saved me when I didn't ask. But this next stretch, I think I need to walk it on my own. He nodded again, jaw tight, eyes full of things he didn't say. Will I see you again? He asked. If you're lucky, she said, smirking just a bit. They shared a final moment. No kiss, no promises. Just a look. The kind that only happens between folks who've seen the worst in each other and still chose to stand side by side. Then she swung into her saddle and rode west, where the sky stretched wider than hope, and the wind carried her name like a whisper. Calder watched till she was a speck on the horizon. Then he turned, mounted up, and rode east. 2 riders, 2 trails. One story that folks in Gila Bend would whisper about for years to come. About the woman they tried to hang. And the deadliest gunslinger who called her his wife.